Hi, Jenna. It's lovely to meet you. Thank you so much for coming on. What's my podcast called? Here on Earth. Sorry.
You're like me. Well, I'm so happy you kind of had a little bit of an error because you pronounce your name Molly.
Yeah,
Okay,
Marley. Yeah,
just wanted to be
yeah.
sure.
My
Okay,
mum heard an American man calling his daughter Molly at the beach, and she thought he was saying Marley, and that's where my name came from. So,
love it.
yeah.
That's cute. It's really cute.
So thanks so much for joining me. Sorry. All right. Thank you so much for joining me. Heard you on the Here for the Truth podcast speaking about circumcision and the spiritual war that we're in. And I reached out because it's something dear to my heart. My husband is Muslim. We had a big, years long argument over whether or not to circumcise our son, our first child. And it was a really big deal and it took a lot of time and energy. And I was really shocked by some of the stuff that you said on the podcast describing the way it's happened and everything. So, anyway, I'd love you to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about how you came to talk about this and work like this.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on and for feeling called to have me speak to your audience about something that is so incredibly important and that more people need to pay attention to, or at least start to have some form of interest to dissect this extremely old surgery that is the longest and oldest surgery that exists in the world today. So I just want to acknowledge you in that and thank you for having the courage to speak to me about something so devastating and deep. My journey began when I guess I usually tell people my heroine's journey started when I was wanting to heal chronic asthma that I used to have. And I even hate saying like I used to have it, right? Meaning like I was like in some ownership, but it was this understanding that the way that I was presenting myself to the world and how the allopathic industry tries to get you to feel like everything is like when you take it in that it's yours and there's like nothing that you can do about it, right? So it keeps you super locked in to the system. And so it was this peeling the layers back of in what ways was I still locked into the system and how had the system ultimately made me fear my body and make me fear breathing and taking up space, which really is what asthma is. It's a lot of grief and it's the inability to really take up space. And I finally started to take up space and ask questions about what is it to be a woman and why are there so many parts of myself that I am afraid to look into. Like I've never wanted to have children. I was very fearful of my period. Like I remember when I first received my menarche, when I started my first period, I hid it from my family for like a year. And it was actually a really traumatic experience for me, understanding that it was like this big resistance to this natural processes that happens to women. And then it was just this whole, like, I felt like I was duped into womanhood. Like I'm duped into having all these inconveniences and how shameful this is. And so that started to be absorbed in through my body, and a lot of it was translating through my inability to breathe. And while I was getting into traditional Chinese medicine and asking myself a lot of the questions during the healing process, which kind of you have to do, you don't just change your lifestyle, sure, your diet, yes, and you remove things that are toxic, but at the same time, you have to really ask deep questions. And why do I think certain ways? And what are these thoughts and belief systems ultimately preventing me from accessing within myself or accessing within really understanding the world that I'm in relationship with? And I realized everything about my femininity, everything about my bleed, everything about my body. Why was it I was more comfortable with my husband at the time looking at my body opposed to me? Why aren't I accessing this deep level of what I know should be a beautiful process, not like an inconvenience to me? And it ended up just revealing so much about what it is to be a woman. And I started to have a lot of really amazing conversations with other women because one of my practices that I started to do on a daily basis was yoni gazing. And because I had never looked at myself, right? Like women looking at their vulva and vagina, it's like an internal process. And the more that I started to connect with my yoni, the more I started to realize that why was I outsourcing and letting so many people have this access to me when I never truly had the full access and autonomy within myself? And with these conversations and everything, that just became this, like a lot of people would turn their heads. They would think I was kind of crazy for looking at my vagina all the time. But it was just really interesting because it became this space where women would just pour out all of these stories about, how certain things that they had let men do, or, certain memories that they would have growing up, they were super ashamed. So there just became this really big common denominator of repression and shame. And I decided to, okay, well, why don't I start to kind of elevate deeper into this journey with developing a new connection with my sexuality and go into another layer of Taoist systems, which is like self-pleasure and using breath techniques to use your sexual energy in a way to clear out the body and to clear out sexual blockages. So I ended up finding like a lot of incredible power in that space. And for the first time, I started to tell myself that I loved myself. And this ended up to me choosing to create a women's brand called Elore, where I hand make organic yoni oils, breast oils, and a couple of other products that I put together to help a woman reclaim her body, to feel the sexual energy move through her, and ultimately have the experience of an awakening, just like I had, because of the conversations that I had had with women where they were completely lacking in that internal agency. And, I was just really enjoying this. And I was a yoga teacher for a really long time and thought, this is going to be the next evolutionary step to like who I'm going to be and who I'm growing into and how I want to continue to teach and be a teacher and educate women. And I absolutely loved it. I spent a lot of time building the brand and the imagery and falling in love with some of the women I was talking to and the people that I would sell the yoni oil to as well. Just like have the feedback was just incredible. And I knew that this was, okay, this is my mission now, right? Like this is who I am. This is who Jenna is about to become. And then 2 years ago, it was 2 days before my 36th birthday, I had a dream where I was a witness to a baby boy being circumcised in a medical setting. And I just get the chills every time I even say that out loud. Truly, it was the most pivotal, the most life-changing dream, the most life-changing moment for me, because not only was the dream incredibly wicked and traumatizing within itself, the scene was extreme, like the same thing that you would get in a medical setting. I mean, I saw the doctors, I saw the like stainless steel tables, I saw the circumstrant, I saw the tools, and I saw this baby. And this baby essentially turned his head and looked over at me, and we had an energy exchange, and he penetrated my soul, my body, and said, you need to witness this. You need to be very present with what you're seeing, and you need to help. And I woke up in the middle of the night pleading and crying and shaking to God and saying, this is absolutely horrible. Please don't ever let me. Like I was in terror, like absolute terror. I couldn't imagine what that would be like. And I was in like so much fear that I was like, please don't ever let me come back as a baby boy. I hadn't really felt that magnitude of honestly, like, holy shit, the torture behind it that I could feel. And it took me over a week before I could actually share the dream with anybody in my life without hysterically crying and having an extreme episode of just like convulsing of like not knowing how to handle the pain that I was feeling. And I reached out to my mentor at the time, and her name's Brenda Pantango. She's just an incredible, incredible, beautiful woman. And she said, Jenna, I think you need to look a little bit deeper into this. I don't think this is just some dream. I think this is a calling. This might be a message from your angels, because nobody just has a dream like this. And I was like, okay, I guess I need to sit with this for a while and figure out what it is that I need to do. And the past 2 years has just been this completely crazy journey of loss, of tears of really digesting the information and studying and studying and studying. How can I be of service, and how can I create more, or turn the light on rather, to something as devastating and barbaric as genital mutilation of newborn baby boys.
Mm. Had you thought about circumcision before, or had you sort of been interested in male sexuality or what was going on with men on the planet, or like, was that?
So my first two partners were intact. And so I didn't know, I didn't know really a difference. I thought it was great. I really liked it. But then I remember when I got into college, some of the women would be like, oh yeah, like a circumcised penis. And I was like, wait, excuse me? They're like, yeah, like at birth, they'll cut the boys, they'll cut the guys, and they remove a piece of skin that's pretty nasty. And then they are better and they look better. So I kind of drank the Kool-Aid for a little bit, thinking, okay, well, didn't really know the difference. And it was in 2020 when I had my big awakening, when all of this asthma healing was going down. It was interesting because we were all wearing the symbolic gag order and being forced and policed by neighbors to basically stifle and stuff your voice and your expression down completely. And I was just breathing for the first time. And that was an explosion of just like serious anger. And so I would go down every rabbit hole. I remember like Wayfair. I don't know if you went down the Wayfair rabbit hole with the child trafficking. And that was kind of like my entry in. And then circumcision popped up a couple months later. I heard a podcast with Janice Barcelo, who is an incredible soul, doing amazing work and exposing a lot about the dark side of the medical cult. And I remember it was a rainy day. I was driving, I used to have a yoga studio. I was driving to my yoga studio, and I remember sitting in the car with my mouth open, like deer in the headlights, just devastated about what I was listening to. And it was pretty traumatizing in there. In that moment, I didn't know how I could take it on. It didn't feel like it was something that I could take on at the moment. But yeah, so it has been about five years of me knowing, but then, the dream was 2 years ago. So
Mm.
yeah.
Because I know that, like growing up, I was sort of, I remember like I think I remember like in high school sort of being pretty like anti-women, anti-feminine. Like I'm one of, like I'd still wear dresses and things, but I'm like one of the boys, and it's sort of like everything to do with femininity is like uncool and weak and blah blah blah. And then I went to university and went full like feminism, and like men are crap and women are great, blah 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 blah. And then like a few things happened, like I don't know. I remember sort of feeling this disconnect of like, but I like my dad and I like my brothers, but all the other men are terrible. And like, and then with my husband being like, oh, but my husband's quite nice and he's had a pretty full on life that wasn't made any easier by being a man. And then I was working in this community as a social worker, and I was really like shocked by what little boys were going through, and that there was really no support for them. Like they couldn't, like there was a lot of violence in this community, and little boys weren't allowed in the women's shelter. And I was like, oh, that's pretty heavy. Like it's like these little kids are just left with the violence because their mums can't take them with them, or they can't access their services. And then when my first child was a son, like was a boy, I just had this like, it was like a big like, oh, like his life is not easier. Like there's a lot of challenges for being born male, and it was kind of, yeah, it was quite shocking to me. It was like, for years I'd heard this sort of rhetoric of male privilege, and realizing like,
Yeah.
oh, that's not quite
Yeah.
the full picture.
It's like really distorted and upside down, truly. I've been reading Warren Farrell's book, The Boy Crisis, and
Mm.
it's so devastating in that like more men, because like suicide is predominantly male. And I've actually even seen, and I'm just going to throw this in there, we'll get into it later, how people like morticians who work at like funeral directors have never seen an intact suicide.
Oh,
And
wow.
but boys, particularly in the UK, there is more suicides in the UK than war like accidents, murders, homicide, since 1945.
Mm.
Then like there's more suicides than there's been war, essentially. Like
Mm.
more people have died from that. And there's this huge shift in men too preferring to have daughters over having boys because of their experience, not really wanting to have a son to have gone through a lot of the things that they've gone through. It's just really interesting because, you know, a lot of these boys live in the same households as these girls. A lot of these boys, you know, they're in the same system, they're in school, but there's just like something that's going on that's deteriorating their ability to focus, that's deteriorating their self-esteem, because I think it just has everything to do with their conditioning and all of the pressure that it is to be a man, to man up, to stifle your emotions, to, you know, in order to be a hero, you have to literally put your life on the line.
Mm.
And although that does sound really brave, and, you know, we do want our men to protect the community, but there is this underlaying fear of like, in order for me to have like pride, in order for me to be respected, I have to put my life on the line and essentially die. But I haven't gotten like too far into the book, but I just remember like what I've been reading right now. It's just been this really, like you were saying, like you think this white privilege, you think this boy who has like all of these, you know, it's so much easier for him, but unbeknownst to us women, we have zero clue like what they're going through because they have been conditioned not to talk to us about what it is that's happening to them.
Mm. And I think at the same time, it's like, um, you know, also being told that masculinity is toxic and not being appreciated for the heroic acts that men do perform. So it's like a double, you can't win either way. It's like if you're not masculine, then you're not a hero, and if you're masculine, then you're toxic and you're the reason that everything is wrong in the world. And it's yeah, it's heavy. And how do you think, when you were saying that you felt disconnected from your own like femininity and your own body, do you feel like that was within your family or within just the
Totally.
overculture at large, or both?
Yeah, it was definitely both. I didn't really come in a family. It was very conservative, and my mom didn't, or my father didn't really speak much to, you know, hey, you're going to be having a period, hey, this is totally natural, you're still really beautiful. There was really no celebration. It was kind of just, you know, hidden and just like behind closed doors, and this is something that you go through, but I never had any like coaching of any sort, what to really expect as your body is growing. Because then if you're a girl and all of a sudden you start to see pubic hair, and then you start to notice like different things changing in your body, you're like, how do I fight this?
Mm.
Because nobody has supported me into understanding what is happening to me and why all of a sudden am I changing. It was so foreign to me. And again, you know, that my peers in school and all the things that were essentially fed. And when you can even think about sex ed in middle school, it was like I remember seeing a cartoon of like a boner, and that was like it. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, and I think that there is such a like a war on both. Like femininity is attacked and masculinity is attacked, and it's like, I guess in the broader scheme of like a spiritual war, I see it as just like that they don't want men and women united. They want
100%.
both of us just totally disconnected from our bodies and in this kind of blah nothing, like with nothingness space where no one is able to step into their role. And yeah.
Yeah, they want us neutral, genderless, disconnected from our archetypes, disconnected to the power that we have between, you know, our bodies. Like women have incredible portals, and our connection to the divine and our spiritual leadership, and how wise and intuitive we are. And then we also have the male, who is extremely grounded, conscious. He's taking so much more of the physical and taking care of us so we can lead more in the spiritual. So we're a team. When we are together and there is coherency and we're connected and there's a vision, so much like can happen and be fruitful within that relationship dynamic. So if you can hijack and put a wedge in between the masculine and feminine, then that's kind of the recipe for a disaster for control and getting people to even further distance themselves from God, because those natural archetypes are ultimately divine and created from source.
Mm. Yes. And so do you think that that was the original um, idea behind circumcision, that it was, like that this sort of procedure was created with that in mind to divide?
Yeah, I think it is, yeah, the biggest procedure because it is the biggest spiritual wound placed upon the masculine. When you can think of his masculinity on a metaphysical level, and you are blocking and striking his ability on a cosmic divine energy level here in this 3D plane from really accessing his truth, accessing his ability to feel safe in his body, accessing his ability to ejaculate creativity into the universe, and to really develop that level of purpose, because like we're not here by accident, right? Like we all have an assignment. But if you can shock, torment, and traumatize an infant at birth, you are gonna tons of the like the soul pieces will end up leaving the body. The soul will end up leaving the body. So you're creating a dissociated and a disembodied man who now cannot trust his parents. He can't really trust the anywhere. So subconsciously it goes into his head of hypervigilance and to fear, to not feel like they can be safe in any room.
Mm.
When ultimately he creates the safety within the container. So if he's not feeling safe within himself, how is he going to be able to create safety in his intimate family container? It's impossible.
Mm. There's a woman, Anna Retatort. I'm not sure how to pronounce her last name. I should have looked it up before this podcast because I knew I was going to say this. But she has a book called she has a book called God Tricks, something of the Matrix. But she talks about how when you abuse children or when you rape children, how you rape the entire universe because they are still plugged in to the universe. So it's like to inflict trauma on someone so young, it's this way of traumatizing everything. And
Absolutely. Because they're still, yeah, they're literally still very much connected to heaven, to the divine, because that's just where they came from. I don't think there is any deeper trauma than circumcision. Because if you think of the elements, we have an infant hours after exiting the womb, not having have had that much mother bonding, not really knowing what is happening, and you're laying him, separating him from mom. He's getting all these feelings of anxiety and abandonment, and we're putting him on sexual torture devices to, with a bunch of lights, different smells, different tools, different sounds, different voices. Everything's cold. And then you're ripping off the most sensitive part of his body, and he's being attacked and raped. So even, and a part of his body is being amputated. So a lot of these men that I have spoken to, they're like, we've never told women that, their sexual abuse or any of their rape has been like unjustifiable or like has been something that's been terrible. Like we're always holding space for them, but it's just really difficult because nobody is even really seeing the fact that I was also raped, but a part of my body was removed without my consent. And to think how nobody can really hold space for that and understand the true depth, the gravity of what is happening. Like it continues to blow my mind. But really considering those different layers of it, that this has got to be one of the most traumatizing things that any human being can truly experience.
mm. and I remember feeling sort of like angry at my husband for um when we started to like so when I was pregnant with my son, my doula knew my husband was Muslim, and on our very first meeting she said, "So what are you going to do about the circumcision thing?" And my initial response was, well, he's the man, he has a penis, I don't, so he can make that decision because that's like his realm. And
Mm-hmm.
she was like, no. She was like, you're the mother of this baby. You have to protect your baby. Like, that's your role as mother. And she was like, will you at least look into it? Like, I could send you a video. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, whatever. And she sent me a video, and I was just like, what the fuck? Like, I did not know that that is what this was. And like, I don't think I even watched it. I think I just looked at like the little like device thing and was just like, oh no, like
Yeah,
that's,
that's enough.
yeah.
Yeah, this seeing the
And
circumstrand is enough for me. Like, don't tell me anymore. You're putting a baby on that?
mm,
No, absolutely fucking not. Like, this is unbelievable, unbelievable.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And then,
I'm curious what was going on to where you were at the time, where you basically said, you know, this is my husband's job to make this choice.
yeah, I just thought like, oh yeah, men's business. Like, I don't know, whatever. Like, if
No big
that's,
deal.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah. Like, I just
because
didn't,
it's sold like no big deal. So you're like, yeah, whatever my husband decides to do.
yeah. And then I think I said to my parents, like, what am I going to do about this circumcision thing? And my mum was like, oh yeah, you should definitely get him circumcised. Like, if they're not circumcised, they have all kinds of problems later in life. And I was like, that's not true. Like, that's not true. And I was like, what? Like, why do you think that? Because I was really shocked because, like, in Australia, so it's not that common. Like, I quickly Googled it and I'm not sure the exactness, but it's like apparently in the 50s, it was like 80% of men were circumcised, but now it's about 10-20%. So perhaps for my parents, they grew up with that being normal, but like in my own life, like it's not that normal, like unless people are religious or something. So
Yeah.
so yeah, I was like shocked by my mum's answer. And then I said it to my dad, and he was like, oh, what's wrong with circumcision? And then so I didn't realize that my dad was circumcised, but through that conversation, I was like, oh, I guess he is. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, okay, like that's odd too. I thought that, I know, I guess I'd imagined his family as like this progressive family. And I was like, but his parents were doctors. So I was like, okay, that's interesting. And then so it just became this thing that every time I met with a doula, she was like, what are you going to do about circumcision? And I would just be like, I don't know, pray for a girl, like nothing, not deal
Wow.
with it, avoid it. Like, and she was like, I think that, you should get clear about it before you give birth because it's going to be a full on thing to decide postpartum. Like, it would be better to
No.
know before then. And I really, it just became like my whole pregnancy was just this fight about circumcision, and I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to face it. And then we found out that I was having a boy, and I was like, oh, I do have to face it. And then, um, I just became more and more sure of like, no, no, no. And then again, like where we live has such an impact as well because it's like, so where we live, you can't even get it done. You have to pay for a private doctor to come here and do it, or you have to take the baby somewhere else. So I think that's one huge piece like in my favor. And then as well that we had a home birth without any medical people present. Like we didn't have any midwives or anything. So again, to have like a natural birth, it would just be insane to go and cut him after that sort of thing. But I know I can imagine that if you have a medicalized birth and if there is all this like abuse and trauma going on during your birth, that it would be much more normal to continue that. Like, and I know that for my husband to see him born, it's like, like, it's like we like, I don't know, lift him up and my husband's like, oh, be gentle, like it's like like it's natural to protect him because he's been protected so far.
Yeah.
But we continued to sort of really fight about it. And then at the time we'd lived in a community where the boys have it done when they're like 14, like when they go through puberty. So that became my thing of I was like, he can do it when he goes through puberty, like he can wait till then and he can decide. And then and my husband was like, well, then he won't choose it. And I was like, well, then he won't choose it. Like
Oh my God. Yeah, right?
that's like
That's
that's
the point.
yeah, like yeah.
Yeah.
And then my husband and his family used to continue to say things like his family would always ask, like, when are you gonna get him chopped? And I think my husband said to him one day when he was like one, he said, like, we're gonna get you chopped one day. And I said, like, that is like the fucking scariest, most horrific, horrible thing to say to someone. Like you're saying to your toddler, I'm going to chop off a part of your body one day. And I was like, never, ever say that to him again. And we had a big fight. And I think in the end, I said, fine, like do it. You go do it. I said, you go find 3 doctors, get 3 independent opinions, get a quote, you sign all the paperwork saying that he'll die, you hold him while they do it, and you deal with every single aspect of it. And you know that I will never, ever, ever forgive you. And we just never spoke about it again.
Wow, I've got the chills.
It makes
Oh,
me want to
good for you.
And
wow.
And then, like years later, I've heard my husband say something about like, yeah, like that's a pretty, like I wouldn't, like I've heard him talking to someone in Pakistan and saying like I wouldn't, yeah, it's not something you'd want to happen to you if you got a choice. And it made me realize that like that he had come full circle. And we ended up doing like a bunch of Kiminami courses, and
Nice.
yeah, and she spoke a lot about circumcision, and sort of me and my husband didn't speak about it to each other, but I think different people saying it in different ways eventually sort of got him to think about it. But how I started this whole story was I was thinking there was times where I was sort of like angry at my husband about problems that were happening, like intimacy problems in our marriage, and I felt mad at him, and sometimes I felt like, oh, this is because of that circumcision. And then I'd also feel like, so if there was a woman who was like mutilated at birth, would I be angry at her for the issues that had given her? Like, would I be mad at her for, some intimacy blocks or some sort of like reluctance or whatever? Like, would I be angry at her for that? And I thought, like, no, it would be really perverted and weird to sort of blame her for what had happened to her at birth. But that's how I felt with my husband. I felt mad at him for what had happened to him. And
That's really big. That's like really big and mature of you to kind of like, you know what, I'm going to pull my focus out from him and look at his story. And look, he is a victim of circumcision. So what part of the mechanisms of that trauma, because like they kind of like bulk up at these little entities, like it's wanting to replicate itself into something else. That's how trauma continues to be passed down. So the fact that you were able to like take like a bigger look at the situation and say, you know what, he's responding from the trauma. This isn't truly who he is, because perhaps maybe if he wasn't cut, like he wouldn't be responding or reacting rather to me in this way. And I just think that's like, I just commend you for that, having that radical responsibility of, I'm not going to project all my anger at you because I realize it's not necessarily you, it's your trauma.
mm-hmm. Thank you.
That's beautiful.
And I mean, there's awareness, and then there's doing it. So I'm still.
Oh yeah, no, it's not. It's not easy, right? Like taking that amount of radical accountability. And if you took Kim's course, you know it. The whole thing is about radical responsibility and really looking very deep into the roles that you're both playing, but being able to also see that there was a third party in your marriage that was causing these issues. And yeah, that's why it usually is passed down, is because a lot of the men that are cut they want their sons to look like them, and they don't feel as if anything has really happened to them. I'm totally okay. Nothing is going on, and they just really haven't gotten to understand the dynamics and how it can affect. And I'm not saying that from a way of trying to force trauma onto everybody, but there are a lot of layers that do affect his ability to really show up and feel his heart, because of the heart blockages that come in, because he's not safe and he's betrayed essentially. So
Sorry. And then I do think that I heard you on the Here for the Truth podcast as well speak about the difference between doing it at birth and how in Muslim cultures they do it older. And I do remember thinking when I learned all about trauma, I was like, oh, he's not that shut down. Like he's not that anti-women. Like he's pretty nice guy. And I I did. Yeah. So like, yeah, in Pakistan, it's done, I think, between 3 and 7. He's not sure how old he was, but
Really? He doesn't remember.
he remembers it happening, but he's not sure how old he was. Um, yeah. And yeah, and I said, like, so when I heard that podcast, I was like, so is that true? Like in Pakistan, like, did they do it when you're a baby or when you're older? And he was like, no, I remember it. And I was like, well, why were you trying to make me do it like when our son was a baby? And he was like, oh, I just thought it would be better not to remember it. Like, and
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
that's kind of just what floats around. It's like, oh, I don't remember mine. It's totally easy. So because you don't remember, although you do, your body remembers everything, your soul remembers everything. I don't remember, therefore, like he's not going to remember. So that removes the ability to empathize with what the baby is actually going through in that moment, because like you're thinking from an adult brain who has had lots of life in from now to from then, and it's removes the heart aspect of really coming into the body and feeling what is going to be really happening, because you can't anymore, because that memory is so repressed into the system. It
mm,
removes and distances him from what's happening to his son.
mm. And so I've looked on your Instagram, and there's heaps of information about like baby circumcision, but I was shocked by like the he had like a picture of like there's something in their mouth to like suck out their vomit, and then restraints everywhere. So it's like, so the baby is held down and just totally immobilized, and then they pass out, and then no one really
Yeah.
knows how painful
Yeah.
it was.
Right. Like the baby comes back clean and, put together, wrapped back in a swaddle and just like given to the parents without really witnessing what goes on. I mean, the things that go on behind those closed doors, like even nurses will faint
Mm.
because, and I even have friends who have told me, I have people that I know from like growing up. Haven't heard their name in forever. They were like a neighbor when I was like 6, and they follow me on Instagram, and they'll be like, hey, I just like wanted to connect with you and let you know, like, I was a nurse. I've seen this. I've never been able to tell anybody. It's so morbid, the things that I have seen watching the babies. They defecate, they throw up on themselves, they pass out. Some of them, their lungs will burst in their chest and they'll die
Oh
because the
my God.
screams are so loud.
Mm.
The brain will never go back to baseline. Yeah,
Yeah, it's full on.
it's full on. And those aren't things that the doctor is going to be telling the parents, because they still want to get their check and they want to continue to receive these checks. So they're going to clean this up as best as they can, unless there is a lot of blood loss, because a lot of babies can die from circumcision from the blood loss as
Mm.
well, and a lot of heart conditions. And I think it's the heart conditions can also come about not only on a physical level, but because the betrayal and the lack of safety and the heartbreak is so intense, which is, I think, the emotion is compounded, which is why it manifests into a physical symptom of disease. Because why do men suffer from heart disease to begin with? What's going on an energetic level with their heart?
Mm. And when I look at my son, I just think like, oh, he wouldn't have survived that. Like, I don't know, he's such a sensitive little boy. Like he still complains about me cutting the cord from his placenta. He's like, why did you cut that? That was mine. And like, so I
Wow.
just
How old is your son?
he's 6.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I love that he's still able to connect with that, because that's another thing, that the umbilical cord is the first cut that babies receive, and that the placenta actually has a consciousness. And the placenta is a big part of their birthing, or rather birthing, their growing, their utero experience. And it almost is like a sibling to them, and they have a deep relationship. I have a friend right now, and she's unbelievable, and she creates these lotus birthing kits. Essentially, she's created this whole ceremony, and it's been like an old tradition that you keep the placenta connected to the baby up until about 2 to 3 days after having have given birth, and then the placenta will naturally, after 48 to 72 hours, fall off. So
Mm.
you give that time for the placenta to continue to have that connection and go through that kind of the end of that chapter with the baby.
Mm.
and you dress the placenta with herbs and different, like, I think she used like salts and herbs, and she has this really beautiful organic cotton like sack. And so essentially you have the baby and then you have the sack. And she was like, when the placenta was in the room with us, when we were experiencing the first couple of days with our child, she could feel this whole incredible celestial energy in the house, like the angels and the portal. Because remember, you even stated that babies are very incredibly close to the divine and where they just came in from. So that part of the portal still comes into the 3D realm with them and is present with them, kind of nurturing them and helping them integrate into this new space that they're now in as they've descended into Earth.
Mm.
And she's becoming extremely successful at it and trying to recreate a movement, because it's a lot of wisdom that's been lost and covered up intentionally by the allopathic system, because it's a medical intervention. This is dangerous. You need us there because you have no idea how unsafe it is to have a baby. So it might as well keep us there to run tests and do everything that we need to do to pump you up with drugs and make sure you're not feeling a thing and that the baby doesn't really feel a thing, and we get him out as soon as possible, because, again, this is a dangerous event.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, and it was really pregnancy and birth that sort of woke me up to everything, just because of how insane. Like, I joke sometimes that, like, oh, lucky it's so crazy, because otherwise, like, it's a good wake up call if you're willing to look at the incongruency and at how bizarre some of it is. Then it's really, hard not to change something. Like, I just
Yeah.
felt again and again in my pregnancy, I was like, they are purposely doing things that are not good for me and my baby. Like, no one cares about me and my baby. Like, what is
Mm-hmm.
this? And
Well, and
then,
then, oh, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
sorry. I wanted to have a lotus birth with both of my babies, and I didn't. Well, we have just ordered a lotus kit, and we will try again this time. But it's
Nice.
funny. So with both of them, I felt like they would cry, and like I couldn't move them freely. So I ended up cutting the cord,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that that's another huge piece of, like, why am I so uncomfortable with crying? Like, why did I feel like I have to, like, jiggle them and bounce them around and stop them crying? Like, why couldn't I be with their emotions? And so, yeah, I thought, that's another interesting part of, like, what everyone says, that babies cry, but then you have a baby that's crying and you're like, oh, they must be hungry. They must be this. They must be that. And it's like, maybe they are talking to you, or maybe they want to be heard. And yeah.
Yeah, they're always trying to share their story and what they're feeling. And it's just really interesting because what you were saying reminded me, why are we choosing that, like, the allopathic route? Because we've been conditioned, right? Like, say, for example, for me, I was terrified of my feminine processes. I was terrified of giving birth. I had heard the worst things. This is going to be painful. This is going to be horrible. You're going to be at the hospital. And, my mom has her stories. Everyone, it's on TV. It's like, it's everywhere. It's just, you can't escape it. But it's because, like, it's designed to keep us away from wanting to deeply connect to our bodies in a way and really understanding its power, so that we can give our agency over and they can basically handle it. You know what I mean? Like, so it's just like, it's interesting to see, because had I had continued down this path and not really asked these questions, I could easily have had a baby and been duped as well, and
Mhm.
not known, because I was so disconnected and because I hadn't tapped into that authority of what it is to be a woman and what it is to really take care of a child. Not that I have a child to take care of, but that energy is ferocious, and she is very intuitive and deep. And you cut a woman away from that, you can control society, you can control humanity.
Mm. And something I love is Emily Saldea from the Free Birth Society. She
Mm-hmm.
speaks often about, like, like, in nature, if you approach, like, a mama bear or a lioness or something, it's like she would kill you before she would let you harm her cub. Like, that's nature's design. And I think that, that's our design as well. But we're so disconnected and tamed and traumatized that it's like that mothers will hand their babies over to be cut and injected and all of these things because it's like, and I know, and I feel like, yeah, I feel, like the sabotage that happens during birth has a lot to do with that. Because again, I feel like if you have a natural birth, then you don't hand your baby over. You won't. Like that instinct is still there. And and then I think that there's different sort of levels of separation. Like I had a natural birth with my son and I feel like it did a lot, but obviously there was still disconnect there. Like when my son was 10 months old, I um, gave him a vaccine. And that was, like I felt fear over, I was more afraid than I was in trust. And I did something. And people say like, oh, like, let it go, it's in the past, it's too guilty or whatever. And it's like, I'm not trying to be super hard on myself. I'm just trying to recognize the truth of the truth of it, that there was a disconnection or a fracture. There was something going on with me that enabled me to hurt my child. Like that wouldn't happen if I wasn't disconnected in some way. And I
Yeah,
know
you needed to find the splinter. You're like, there's a splinter here, and like,
mm,
where can I locate it and fully heal and remove it? So like, it doesn't happen again, because it's that level of curiosity that's going to add even more information.
mm,
So you can also help facilitate more awakening or more awareness to other women who you may notice that similar splinter in them.
mm,
You know what I mean? So I think that level of deep discovery is really important, opposed to being like, oh, I did that. You know what? I'm going to forgive myself. And you know what, when you know it, moving on. But you're like, okay, you know what, when you know it, and I can forgive myself. However, I need to go a little bit deeper to understand what it was that led me to that decision, and
mm,
how can I heal her,
mm.
which is
Yeah, for
beautiful.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. And then because, yeah, with my daughter, like, so then I have a 3-year-old daughter and her, like her whole pregnant, like with my son, it was like, will I go to hospital? Won't I go to hospital? Will I go to hospital? Won't I? Like it wasn't decided until the last minute. Whereas with my daughter, it was like, of course I'm not like doing any of that. And then when she was born, it was like, of course I'm not taking her to a doctor. Of course I'm not outsourcing any part of this. Like, I don't need to, sort of thing. So I think, yeah, I can see the difference in like how I felt about myself and then how that influenced how much I could protect my children. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I do want to add what's really fascinating, because I know that, it's, we have a free birth, we have a home birth, we go to a birthing center, we are away from the system. But I know of plenty of cases of women that will still have really beautiful home births with a doula, with music, dim lights, the whole thing. And they will still choose, after having a most beautiful birth, to take the baby to a clinic and circumcise it.
Mm. Yeah,
And
it's
so
interesting.
it's one of those, again, those deep layers of, it's, what's happening in the family, what do they know, what don't they know. And the program can run just as deep to think, okay, I'm going to move away from the system and have like this birthing experience that's going to be more beautiful, and take ownership, like really do this in the best way that I can to invite this birth and the baby into the world and all this love. And then all of a sudden, these moms will take their babies to these clinics, and the babies come back, because I have a really good friend who works with, she does cranial sacral, tongue ties, breastfeeding consultations, and all those types of things, like a full spectrum practice. And she'll hold the babies after they've been circumcised. And she was like, it's so, the betrayal and the rage in their body, and how they respond, and how some of these mothers are like, he's never been the same since his circumcision. And even dads walking down the stairs holding the baby, knowing that we now had this baby at home, and we were able to bond with him for a couple of days. We took him to get cut. Now he's home. He hasn't been the same in weeks. He's constipated. He's rigid. He can't keep his milk down. He's throwing everything up, and he's becoming malnourished because it is so traumatic, and his body is having a biochemical reaction to the trauma.
Mm. Mm. And I know for my husband, it was such a full-on thing for him. Like he had so much fear. He was like, this baby won't go to heaven. This baby can never go to Pakistan. Like he would be attacked or mobbed, or like he'd be out of the tribe. He wouldn't be accepted. Like he had so much. And obviously none of that, I feel like none of that is true. But like he had so much about it. And yeah, like this baby will not go to heaven. This baby was not connected to God unless we do this thing. And I kept saying, like, why would God get something wrong? Like, why would God design a baby with a foreskin if he doesn't want him to have one? Like, it makes no sense. But
Yeah, like God created it, but yet he can't come back with
yeah,
what he created. Like
yeah.
it contradicts itself. It doesn't make any sense. And then that's when you kind of start getting into the satanic infiltration of the system and of any religion that is prescribing circumcision as something that's holy, that's for cleanliness, and clearly now you don't have a ticket back into heaven.
Mm,
So if you can get people again in that fear, of course they're going to believe that because they want to do anything that they can to go back to heaven.
mm, mm. Yeah, no, it's so full on. Um, Another thing you spoke about on the Here for the Truth podcast was just like the money side of foreskins, and like, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Um, so the average amount that the foreskin industry or the circumcision industry makes as a whole is 6 billion. And I've even seen some other intactivists put numbers together and actually have a much higher number than 6 billion. But right now, just because it's easier to access and see online, if you want to do the research, 6 billion is the number. So not only do we have these doctors that are receiving a big incentive to circumcision, the medical industry is also getting a lot of cash because of all of the devices that they're making for circumcision itself. So you have pharma profiting from, any of the anesthetics that they use, don't use any of the tools, any of the supplies, for what it takes to actually lay a baby down and go ahead with the procedure itself. The hospital will then sell the foreskin to the beauty industry, and then they will also sell it to some burn units where because the foreskins are rich in a cell called a fibroblast. And I always like to say that a fibroblast is like the stem cell to the connective tissue. So a fibroblast, when force is applied to it, which is the language of cells for growth, because the body wants to stay in homeostasis. So you want to be sure that when the environment is changing, the body has to adapt. So that's why force is the language to change cells into what they need to become in order to adapt to the environment. So fibroblasts can easily turn into skin. And so they will put it on burn units to help, again, like replenish any of the burning, that injuries or open wounds that they have. They sell it to the beauty industry just because of what I said, essentially. I mean, it's the stem cell to connective tissue, skin, collagen, cartilage, bone, muscle, what have you, right? It is going into these beauty products that women are currently buying and wearing on their face today. A lot of these people are selling like penis facial treatments
Mm,
that cost upward to 600 a pop. And then on top of all of these different facets that are kind of making money from the tools, you also are considering the Viagra and other types of medication that these men then later, after they've been cut, they have to get on, because circumcision causes erectile dysfunction, impotence, and a lot of other sexual problems later in life that connects them back into the system. But not only is this being kind of fed through life, essentially, it's like our entire lifestyle is like, believe it or not, there's this like infiltration of human foreskin that's being, through our economy. We have the sexual wellness industry, and the sexual wellness industry is also not funding, but making money off of lubrication. and lubrication would not be necessary if more men were intact, because the foreskin creates moisture and lubrication in addition to the female vagina. So it's, think about even like hand jobs, right? Like with a circumcised man, they're nearly impossible without any form of, because of the traction, without any form of lotion or lubrication. So, I mean, I can't even imagine how many lubrications are on the market today, but it's just, we're masking all these different things behind trauma without really like looking at why do we need all this lube to begin with. But well, we've been conditioned that's just necessary, that our body isn't creating the fluid necessary to have a functional and beautiful sexual experience, devoid of friction and dryness and discomfort, because it also makes the female very uncomfortable in contrast to an intact man, because of the engineering mechanisms of the foreskin itself are specifically designed for it to work in a beautiful way, to where like she's not experiencing a lot of pounding, friction, and it's completely changed the way that men have sex altogether.
Mm-hmm. I saw this on your Instagram, but I wanted to share it for anyone listening to this. But the thing that the man showed you, where you run your finger across your palm, and like that sensation of nerves, and then versus like doing it on the top of your hand, and yeah, like when I did that, I was like, yeah, that's so full on. So then, of course, you can imagine a totally different movement is required during sex to get stimulation if it's like this sensitivity versus this. And
Yeah, yeah. So the foreskin is rich in Meissner's corpuscles, which are very sensitive nerves that create a lot of pleasure. And because the foreskin itself is a double layered, it's an organ. I do not call it skin. It's like saying like my hand is skin, because there's skin on it, right? So it's a double layered mechanism. So when it goes into the vagina, the foreskin will retract back, but when it comes out and moves back in, the foreskin is getting the double mucosal layer of, each side, and each side will have all of the Meissner's corpuscles, which are all of the pleasure sense, like this, the sense of what we're really experiencing. And so all of the Meissner's corpuscles that exist really on the male penis is removed in circumcision. And I know some people who have stated that they've heard the American Association of Pediatrics, like doctors, like secretly say that they know that there's at least, because people always say there's about like 20,000 nerve endings on the foreskin, but they're saying no, it's closer to like 80 to 100,000 nerve endings on the foreskin itself. And one thing that I didn't have the chance to share on that podcast is the foreskin is the only part of the male's body that has specific cell receptors on it that connect to the male's brain. And when connected and released inside the female vagina, what it does, it creates a neurochemical cocktail that allows him to fall in love and to bond with a woman. So not only are we removing a highly sensitive, innervated part of his sexuality, we have also amputated a mechanism that was engineered specifically for him to fall in love and bond deeply with the woman that he is intimate with, therefore creating a much richer union and sexual experience of deep connection and presence.
I think another part of what you said on the podcast that I found quite hopeful, um, is the idea that, that like physically we can be separated or whatever, but that in spirit we're not, so that men still have like the energetic foreskin or something. And that you said that you have that you've seen people or worked with people that sort of have connected into that and healed miraculously, or like
Yeah, so I have a really good friend of mine who he's done a lot of healing work. I haven't worked with him personally. he's done a lot of healing work on his circumcision itself, and from intention and the way that he just like holds reverence for his cock and his divine vessel of his sexuality. He has started to grow his foreskin a little bit, and it started to pull more forward over the glands, and he's seen more skin and retractability through his shaft. So I just coach him and tell him, you know, hey, this is where you're at. If you want to try to get a little bit better, why don't we go ahead? I kind of use him as my guinea pig. Why don't we go ahead and try castor oil? Why don't we do like this type of meditation? Why don't you hold a different type of intention while you are doing it, and do it like X, Y, and Z? So it is through some of the knowledge and the education that I have on scar tissue remediation and how to get the skin. Because again, some of these guys, well, depending on their cuts, some cuts are so severe that there's like hardly any skin. And a lot of these guys have a lot of pain, that getting an erection feels very tight because they're pulling so much skin. What happens, or taking so much of it off, when he gets an erection, part of his pubic skin, his pubis, and even the pubic hair will start to pull forward. And that's why you'll see some men who actually have hair growing on their shaft. Mm-hmm. But that is actually skin that belongs to his pubic bone area. And even the scrotum too, it will take a lot of the scrotum and lift it up and pull it forward down to where the frenulum used to be. So you have more of the body, the part of the body that should be located more on the body, not necessarily like on the penis itself. So because some of these guys really don't have much to work with, it's usually very difficult, unfortunately, for them to try to get any of the fibroblasts, because they're gone now, because they were all in the foreskin. But some of these cuts, specifically within the Judaism, specifically in Judaism, they try to cut as much skin as possible because they don't want them trying to get and grow the foreskin back. So, but there are men that actually will have cuts that are a lot lower, a lot more malleable. There's more freedom, and there's more room for them to work and play with the skin so that you can offer a new level of growth and foreskin restoration, essentially. Yeah. But I do believe that I realize I just didn't finish answering your question. So when you can really think about the design of the human body itself, you have the archetypal divine feminine, and then you have the archetypal divine masculine. And his blueprint, his structure in a morphogenetic sense is a code. How does a boy come into a boy? How does a lizard regrow its tail? How does the body, how does the field, the quantum know how to redevelop and create this part of the body over again? Like, where is that coming from? What is the cloud within space that's creating all of these material mechanisms to become the human body? And so with every blueprint of the divine masculine comes the foreskin. And I deeply believe there are layers in him. Like, although in this 3D body it has been amputated, I still believe that the essence, almost like the phantom limb, right? Like some people are amputee, they're an amputee, but they can still feel or like have a crazy itch on an arm that no longer exists. So kind of like this, the same thing is like, how can you still, that's a way for me to encourage the positive rhetoric and empowering rhetoric of, you really haven't truly been robbed, because who you are hasn't experienced circumcision. This 3D body has, but you have multi-layers, and ultimately you are a soul in a body. And it really is up to your spirit. It really is up to your soul to create a beautiful place inside of your body to reside in. But the problem is we get so connected, and I am my body, I am my body, I am what happened to me, I am this, that we lose sense of who we are ultimately as spirit, as this these codes that come into the physical form to have these experiences. So I just think it's really empowering to realize if we can take our power back from a spiritual level and pull that energy back into our body and create this vessel, a beautiful place to reside in, then ultimately they're not going to be experiencing that much pain because they realize they're not their body. Does that make, am I kind of making sense a little bit when I'm talking about this? It's all pretty much new revelations I've been having when I really think down, because I'm about to launch a new men's program and healing, and how can we separate and really get the mending and the heart to come in coherence back with the spirit and heal this from a level where we become more whole and not something where we look down because men are just kind of at war with their penis because of what's happened and they feel so betrayed. Now they're just living in this ultimate betrayal and constantly having a part of themselves that's this reminder of what was taken from them.
And I know in Kim Anami's work as well that she speaks about people having cervical orgasms when they've had their cervix removed. And but yeah, and again, looking at your Instagram, and I was just like Googling a bit in Australia. Like I was like, does circumcision still happen in Australia, and where and why? And and it was saying that, like for medical reasons. And I was like, well, what's the medical reason? And then it was saying like, oh, I hope I can edit out all my coughing. But about about as like as older men having problems with this with their foreskin and stuff. And then I was thinking, like, what's the German new medicine reason for that? Like, what's it called when the foreskin is tight and it creates infection or something?
Phimosis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then so it was like separation, conflicts, and sort of and sexual, like, so self-devaluation and all that. And I was thinking, like, how does overculture and porn and just the stories and everything, and then again on the women's side of women having their uteruses removed and all of this stuff, like what is the culture of like just chop it off, like just like the body's faulty, remove it, cut it away,
Mm-hmm.
medicate it, blah
Yeah.
blah blah.
Yeah. Everything, tonsils, wisdom teeth, uteruses, foreskins. I mean, so many. I think our is it gallbladder? I think
Mm,
gallbladders. Like, you're just like, oh,
mm,
you don't really need this anymore, and they're just like, it's an inconvenience, and like you said, like out of design, it was a mistake, and you're gonna totally be fine without it. But like everything is really intentional and
mm,
beautiful and intelligent the way that it was placed in your body, and it does end up ultimately causing a lot of fucking problems. Like
mm,
and then telling us like, yeah, let's just put it in the trash, no big deal. Like I'm gonna be fine, but then you don't realize that now you're even more tied to the system, because now there's gonna need to be a medication or a supplement to supplement the loss or removal of whatever organ that just came out of the body. But it's all to make money. I mean, I saw a picture the other day, and I'm not really going to say this very well, but it was like the black market, like how expensive your body is. Like, I think eyeballs in the black market were like, oh my God, like 30K. And then like other parts of the body, I remember seeing it was like this figure, and it was just like, the liver or the heart, like, they're worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. So like our body actually is worth a lot of money, but yet they're convincing us to remove these things. But at the same time, like, I don't know, it's a whole rabbit hole that I haven't looked
yeah,
into, but it's just like the body, it's like, it's priceless. It truly is.
yeah. It also reminded me, it was like the idea of foreskins and stem cells being used, and like, like this sick idea of sort of like sacrifice the children for immortality for the rich and famous or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like it's crazy. It sort of reminded me as well of like COVID times of like, like keep all the children at home to protect the grandparents or something. And it's like this sort of backwards thing of like, again, of like sacrifice children because there's some old people that are scared of getting old. Like, it, yeah,
Death. Well, yeah. I mean,
yeah.
that's one thing that I have actually come into my awareness that I've been curious about is, um, I think we're more fearful than of death than we've ever been.
Mm,
And if we were all to kind of come to peace at our mortality, and really understand that we're not here by accident. Like we all have an assignment. There's all something really amazing about it, and it is a short time, but how can we make the best of it? And also realize where we came from as spirit, and trust that even though this body is no longer, we can still continue on. And that removal of our connection to that level of spirituality and divinity is what's creating so much of this fear and all of these decisions. Like everything is fear-based. Going to the hospital for a birth is fear-based. Cutting your infant on his genitals is fear-based. Like everything is just because we don't want a problem. We don't want you to die. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. I've just been really thinking about how culture over time has started to fear death a lot more, and it's marketable. It's extremely marketable.
Yeah, so afraid of dying that we're not living. And
Exactly.
and I wonder as well of like where, again, like I don't know, huge question, but like what is the purpose? Where is the money going? Where is the energy going? Like who is the they that's sort of orchestrating this? Like
Yeah, it's, if you were to kind of go back a couple of dimensions, it would ultimately be, everything that we're experiencing as a spiritual war.
mm,
So you can understand that it seems a lot more simple, though, like it's not simple to think about spirituality, but I think sometimes it's actually a lot more simple than we think that it is. And so like on a spiritual level, right, if the dark can harvest more of our energy and continue to create narratives and continue to create a reality based upon our fear and based upon our degradation, it gives them more power. Therefore, when they're in a body, they're capable of having more. And so it also creates a lot of joy within them to harm and to think and to brainwash others for, I don't know, it's wicked. Like I know the dark is dark, but going down this path and learning a lot too about the forces that are at hand that are creating a lot of the sacrifices and the pain that's happening on a global level. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable to think about how dark it is. And yeah, that's just usually how I try to think of it. Sometimes I just take it out and I'm like, okay, this is a spiritual thing. So in what way can I tap more into my spirit to heal so that I can be sure that I'm taking care of what it is that I need to take care of to eliminate everything that they're trying to do? Because when we do that, then we will prevail away from this, because the pendulum is always swinging. Like I was telling a friend the other day, because I host these free circumcision calls, and I was telling a friend the other day, I said, because a lot of these men are completely deflated. They don't think that people are going to wake up. They're so angry at society. And I said, the pendulum always swings. This will shift. I deeply believe with all of my body. And if it's not in my lifetime, it's not. But at least that we can steward this awakening and turn the light on. I do know that there will be a day where across the board, this will not exist anymore. I truly do.
mm, mm. And yeah, again, it is just crazy the difference between like most people, most people in our countries anyway, like most Australian, most American, would be like on general would be opposed to female genital genital, genital mutilation. Like it's like, like it's illegal, but circumcision is bizarrely accepted. And
Yeah.
yeah, and I was like in
Go
Australia,
ahead.
it's still like you still can claim it on Medicare. So it's like it's still part of like
Really?
the government is paying for it sort of thing. Like
I didn't know that.
it's I think it's illegal. I think it's not done in public hospitals, but you can still claim the rebate through a private hospital. So like that's pretty wild.
Intense.
Yeah.
It is really intense. And what's so fascinating, and it was, I think the day after I had the interview with Yerasimos and Joel, and I got an email from Brenda, who was my mentor, that I originally said that, I had this dream. She's a very, very close friend of mine and amazing. Anyway, There are a lot of women now currently on U.S. soil being circumcised. Women have in terms of female circumcision, there are different types and how they go about it because of the layers of the vulva itself and how they can remove it. And a lot of Somalians circumcise 99% of the women within their culture. And it's a very barbaric practice in how they go about it because it is forced upon women. It becomes this extreme ceremony. They do it in broad daylight with really bad tools like razors that are old, and there's zero anesthetic. And they have immigrated into Minnesota, and there's about 500,000 of them currently. And it is slowly, very slowly trickling out. A couple, like it was Naomi Wolf. She's a journalist and a wonderful writer. She wrote one of my favorite books, Vagina, and a couple of other really like feminine forward pieces of literature. And she was one of the people that was exposing what's going on, and come to find out more people are starting to share that it's happening on a really big scale, that they've even tried taking one of these female doctors who's been circumcising these women to court, but the court here in the United States keeps dismissing it, and this woman is walking away because they're saying that it is protected under the umbrella of religious practice. Because like there's no religious practice really in the United States, like, you know, for Judaism for boys, sure, but what religious practice in the United States is promoting or trying to participate within the ritual of circumcision on females? There's not very many of them, but now we have these Somalis that are currently doing it every day right now. And she actually just so happened to be in Minnesota for a family thing. And she said, because she ended up texting me, we've been texting back and forth, that even at the hotel she was at, she saw a lot of these women in their garbs, and specifically a 7-year-old girl who had a bunch of extra like sparkles and sprinkles on her entire, like her wardrobe. And she was with mom and aunts and everything. And she was like, I think it's about to be her circumcision day. And they're dressing it up as some really beautiful ceremony when, unbeknownst to her, they're going to be cutting off her clitoris, her labia, sewing it shut, and only keeping a very small part of her vagina available for penetration later whenever she does have a husband.
Yeah, wow, that's so full on. Yeah. And I think, like, as we were speaking about sort of before we started recording, I think that this idea of like, I can do what I want because it's my religion, like, it's like, I don't know, like, yeah, like, if your religion or your culture harms children, then it's like your culture needs to change, like, full stop. Like, it's
it's the fear, and then it's, you're no longer going to be a part of us. It's like the fact that you can be so alone and ostracized. I mean, that's why people conform to social norms, because they don't want to be ostracized by their community. I mean, that's one of the most challenging and terrifying parts of being human, is not having community and not having connection. So it makes it easy for us to subscribe to specific rituals, specific beliefs to do these things. But then you have it again under the religion of under the umbrella of religion, which it's like, fuck, that is since utero. You are conditioned that this is how it is. This is what it's going to be. You are shamed. There is guilt. This is just, it's just what you do, and you don't ask any questions. And this is what God said you should do. This is your ticket into heaven, like we were saying earlier. And it's ultimately barbaric. It is an infiltration. There is no way that any light of God, any divine, absolute being would ever try to get you to do. That is a trick. And when you know when the dark is at hand, when it is camouflaging something and there's a trick involved. When you can see the trick in it, you know exactly the intention, you know exactly where this is coming from. And that's where all of this is stemming from directly. Anything in religion that is putting harm and harming an infant or harming someone on their genitals, which is their connection to God, and telling them that this is something that is for the benefit, and this is something that is good, and this is something that chosen people do, and this is how we get back into heaven, then there's no fucking way. No fucking way. So why is it that so many people can't smell the deception? Like, why are we so incapable of really seeing that there's a trick? This just doesn't fucking make sense. Make sense of that. You can't. But because the brainwashing is so deep, because it comes from utero, it's programmed into the subconscious mind, which is the difference between having a baby being circumcised and then, like you said earlier, you know, having a 7-year-old. When you do this so soon into the development and the imprint of who this baby ends up becoming in his subconscious, we're operating 95% within our subconscious mind in this moment. So if you can program that into him, it's done. You'll go on it.
Mm. There's an Instagram account called the Tin Man. It's this guy George from UK, but he talks heaps about, like, I don't know, men's issues and stuff. But he had a post. I'm not sure what country it was. I can't remember. Maybe it was Somalia or maybe it was Congo. But he was talking about that the boys are circumcised and that then you can't seek medical care, or like you're not allowed to see anyone about any infections, otherwise you're kicked out from the tribe. And he was, yeah, it was just this.
Even after being
Yeah,
cut,
yeah,
you can't see.
yeah, you can't get
Wow.
any care for it. So he was saying that, yeah, that there are all these men who will, you know, choose to die rather than try and get help because it's like death or outcast. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, Sorry, I know we're sort of running out of time, but there was one more thing that I was really interested in about what you said on the Here for the Truth podcast, was when you were speaking about, I can't remember how you worded it, but about rape tags and about, yeah, can you explain that?
Yeah. I would love to. So, a couple of months after I had the dream, I ended up training with Brenda in a healing modality called soul rejuvenation. And soul rejuvenation, essentially, imagine like soul retrieval, like I like to call like 5.0, essentially. It is very thorough, very fortifying, and very cleansing for the soul. Because when trauma happens to the body, specifically in circumcision, parts of the soul will leave the body. So the more trauma we have, the less pieces and the less whole we really are and integrated into the body. We're disconnected from spirit. We're disconnected from our purpose. So it is like a comprehensive healing that helps people really focus and get centered on who they are on an energetic level in the 12-dimensional field within the holographic blueprint of the body, like we've been speaking about with the archetypes of the masculine and the feminine. When I had the dream, Brenda said, there's no coincidence, because I was already enrolled in soul rejuvenation before I even had the dream. She said, there's no coincidence here. What I'm going to do is we're going to develop an extra program where I'm going to teach you about the tags, seals, and implants that are placed upon the archetypal, upon the holographic blueprint of our bodies when we come into the 3D realm, and that can stick and stay with us through different lifetimes, because they're all degradatory types of technology to keep us from awakening. Because the womb, actually, every time a baby is born, and if we were actually in our pristine, remember who we are, energy of who we really are as human beings, every soul coming in should always be ascending. Like, we should be having higher vibrational souls. But the problem is, when you look at the medical system and allopathy, you can start to see that, I wonder who is really controlling all of this. So we dissected some of the implants. There's a lot of these implants and tags and seals, but we specifically went into the sexual ones, the ones that are webbed and wrapped around the female and the male's sexual identity and function. So for the female, we have specific tags, implants that are rape and molestation tags. empath and narcissist. The females also come in with gag orders because essentially, like I was talking about, women, why is it that women have rape? Why is it that women have such a hard time vocalizing and communicating? It's because there is something on an energetic layer that is preventing them from fully accessing their throat chakra. And then their throat chakra and this availability of really speaking also is deeply connected to our womb. In addition to, like, why are people more prone to being raped and molested? Why are some of these women who have had sexual violation, it hasn't just been once, like it continues to happen? It's because there are specific technologies in place that are implanted into her that are naturally attracting violators into her external experience. And so the deep impact of this makes a lot of sense as to why the women are acting the way that they are in like actual like today, and why we're more capable of subscribing to the conformity of the medical cult. But then you have the masculine, and he also comes with his own spiritual degradatory type of technology, and the SRA, so the satanic ritual abuse, which is what circumcision is. Circumcision connects the baby after the blood has been spilled. It represents a sacrifice. And the blood actually is harvested on an energetic layer and connected and fed into the false god, or like the blood demon Moloch. So when this connects the baby to the devil, essentially, it puts in him a false god ideology. So making it easier for him to conform to religious beliefs, conform to different brainwashing tactics, that it's just like, why are some of these religious groups more prone or masculine prone? And then in addition to his situation with him, there's a lot of other degradatory things that prevent him ultimately from connecting to a woman within his body. And he also has impotence and erectile dysfunction and like STD tags and things that will actually promote him having more sexual misery in his life. So through soul rejuvenation and through everything that I was able to learn, I can now remove these degradatory pieces of technology that are having a incredibly large impact on humanity.
Mm. Yeah, that's so interesting. And I mean, before hearing you explain it that way, I remember that I used to just think like I know people where it's like they've had a lot of sexual trauma. And I used to think of it as in like, okay, so the earlier that you've had, like sort of in a manifestation way of like the earlier that you, so very early you have this sexual trauma, and then that's in your field. Like, you know, that's possible now. So it's like, you know, and the way that your brain is scanning for sameness sort of thing. So it's like, because you've already had it happen once, it's like you can imagine it again and again and again. And then at the same time, your sort of danger senses have been turned off. Like, it's like you were not able to escape one time, so then it's like you walk down an alley and you don't get the normal intuitive hint to get out of that alley sort of thing, because it's like you've been wrong so many times before. And I just, yeah, I think it's really tragic, because I know a number of people where it's like they've had this horrible thing happen to them in childhood, and then it's happened again and again and again. And yeah, it's really
Exactly.
sad, and people feel
Yeah.
really trapped. So it's amazing um to imagine that there's a way to turn that off. Yeah.
Yeah, it's what's so crazy about it is, you know, from someone who hasn't really looked deeply into spiritual warfare or any of that, and you can hear some of this stuff, there's something about it that resonates,
Mm.
because you're like, it makes sense. Like, why would certain things, even like fertility implants or infertility implants in women, like, why is that something that's become more prominent in our culture? Sure, there's different things that are going on, like glyphosate and the way that we're eating and all of the processed foods and the shit that's in our water. Like, it's awful and it's impacting our body and our ability to procreate. But it's like these pieces of technology are constantly being thrown at us, on like even now, like there's more actually being thrown on us now today than there was about like 20, 30 years ago, because they're picking up on us awakening, because the awakening is happening. So they're trying to get a lot more sophisticated or a lot more like ahead of the game, because they have to prevent it by continuing to push out stuff. Like, why else is Hollywood so satanic? Why, like, what's coming on? Like, why are all these, what are they called? Super Bowl performances. Like, when you actually look at them, there's like all of these weird rituals. And then the rituals within the Olympics, the opening. Did you remember the France one? Did you remember watching any of the opening or the closing ceremonies that they have? They're all these harvesting mechanisms where they're casting more degradatory type of waves and frequencies to us at a constant level. So it's just like this really never ending situation of them trying to trick us. However, like, they don't realize that no matter what they do, there is a big part of the humans that are coming in now that, like, you can't, they're awakening. Like, it's happening whether they want it or not. And clearly, because if we're recognizing these types of devices that are keeping us more degraded, then we know how to remediate and remove them from ourselves and continue to stay connected to spirit and to who we originally are, because that's what they're trying to remove us away from. Which is why, for me, it's so important to have these men really realize you are so much more than your body, and we are so much more powerful, and all of these things can heal. You can become whole again. Although it doesn't look the way that you want it to look here in the 3D, when you become whole in your spirit and integrate that back into your body, it's not going to affect you on the level that it's currently affecting you. And again, in order to heal from spiritual warfare, we have to go deeper into the spirit, deeper into spiritual healing. And again, I'll say it 1,000 times and over. We have to use spirit to help us truly heal in this place, to realize again who we are, to get the pendulum back to the other side, because ultimately it's coming and it's going to happen.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge and wisdom with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a
Yeah.
pleasure talking to you. I could talk to you all day. I mean, it's such a deep topic. There's so much to cover when it comes to circumcision, truly.
Yeah. And I highly advise everyone to go check out your Instagram page, because I've just been looking through since you're on the podcast and there's so much there. So what are the ways that how can people contact you and work with you?
So you can follow me on Instagram. I have a YouTube channel where I interview a lot of people in the field and I put out a lot of rich content. You can also go to my website. I'm actually making a website switch, but right now, if you follow me on Instagram, it will take you to a Calendly link and you can book a 30-minute consultation with me. Not only do I work with men, I also work with women, because women are a really big piece to really helping the removing circumcision from our existence, essentially. So, you can find me at jennamcclelland.co and book a call with me on my Calendly link. And I'd love to talk to you. So,
Thank you so much. It was so lovely to meet you.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Okay, I'm going to press